Imagine a time when fear ruled the hearts of God's people. For 40 years, the Philistines oppressed the Israelites, their cries of despair rising to heaven. But in the silence of their suffering, God was already at work. In the small town of Zorah, a miracle was about to unfold. A story of strength, failure, and redemption that would echo through the ages. This is the story of Samson, the man set apart to deliver his people. Manoah and his wife longed for a child. And one day an angel appeared to Manoah's wife, saying,
"You are barren and childless, but you will conceive and give birth to a son. This child will be a Nazirite, dedicated to God. No razor shall touch his head, and he must not drink wine or eat anything unclean. He will begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines."
She ran to tell her husband. And Manoah prayed, "Please, Lord, let the man of God you sent come back to us and teach us how to raise the boy you have promised." God answered, and the angel returned, confirming the instructions. When Manoah offered a sacrifice, the angel ascended in the flames, leaving them amazed. If an angel ascended in flames while giving you parenting advice, you'd never forget it. God knows how to make an impression. In time, Manoah's wife bore a son and named him Samson, meaning sunlight. As Samson grew, the Spirit of the Lord was with him, preparing him for his purpose, to deliver Israel. As Samson grew, his strength and confidence became evident. One day, he visited Timnah, a Philistine town, where he saw a young woman and told his parents, "I have seen a Philistine woman. Now get her for me as my wife." Imagine being Samson's parents. He demands a Philistine wife, and they're like, "Really? Out of all the women, you pick our enemies?" But here's the beauty. God can use even our unconventional decisions for his greater purpose. His parents objected, saying, "Isn't there an acceptable woman among our own people?" But Samson insisted. They relented, not knowing that this was part of God's plan to confront the Philistines. On the way to Timnah, a lion suddenly attacked Samson. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, and he tore the lion apart with his bare hands. He told no one about this encounter. Later, passing the carcass, Samson found bees had made a hive inside. He scooped out honey, eating it and sharing it with his parents without revealing its source. Bees in a lion's carcass? That's definitely not your typical beekeeping story. But Samson casually scooped out the honey, proving he was not only strong but also bold and unbothered by the unusual. This moment foreshadowed the strength and complexities that would mark his life. This whole encounter hints at Samson's dual nature, a man of immense strength and incredible courage, but also someone prone to impulsiveness. Keep an eye on that, it'll come up again. Despite the uneasy alliance between Samson's family and the Philistines, wedding preparations began. At the 7-day feast, Samson, full of confidence, proposed a riddle to 30 Philistine men. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. Samson loved a good challenge, and what better way to show off than with a riddle? But this wasn't just any riddle. It came straight from his unique encounter with the lion and the honey. Let's see how the Philistines handle this one. The men could not solve it. Frustrated, they pressured Samson's wife, threatening, "Coax your husband to tell us, or we'll burn you and your father's household to death." My goodness! These Philistines didn't play around. Their solution to a riddle? Threatened Samson's poor wife. This shows how desperate and ruthless they were. Fearful, she pleaded with Samson, and on the 7th day he revealed the answer. When the men declared, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" Samson realized he had been betrayed. Angrily, he replied, "If you had not involved my wife, you would not have solved my riddle." Enraged, he killed 30 Philistines in Ashkelon to fulfill his wager and left the feast. Meanwhile, his wife was given to another man. Talk about things going from bad to worse. Samson's anger led to a violent confrontation. As if that wasn't bad enough, his wife was given away. You can feel the tension building between Samson and the Philistines. It's about to get even more intense. When Samson learned his wife had been given away, he vowed, "This time, I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them." Samson wasn't one to let betrayal slide. His words here weren't just about revenge. They show how personal this conflict had become. He captured 300 foxes, tied torches to their tails, and released them into the Philistine fields, destroying their crops. Goodness! The sheer effort of catching 300 foxes alone is mind-blowing. Samson didn't just act with strength. He had a flair for dramatic and devastating revenge. The Philistines retaliated by burning his wife and her father alive. Consumed by fury, Samson declared, "Since you've acted like this, I swear I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." He attacked them viciously, then withdrew to a cave in Etam. The Philistines demanded Samson's capture. The men of Judah, fearing retribution, bound him and delivered him to the Philistines. But as they approached, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. Samson broke the ropes as if they were threads. Grabbing the jawbone of a donkey, Samson fought, declaring, "With a donkey's jawbone I have made them a heap. With a donkey's jawbone I have struck down 1,000 men." Samson didn't need a sword or an army, just God's power and an unlikely weapon. This shows that when God is with you, He can turn the simplest tools into instruments of victory. Exhausted, he cried out, "You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" Samson's prayer here shows his dependence on God, even in his strength. Through such a triumph, his vulnerability reminds us that no matter how strong we are, we still need God's provision. God provided water from a hollow place, restoring Samson's strength. Samson's strength and daring exploits made him a constant threat to the Philistines. However, his weakness, his impulsiveness and attraction to women, led him into a dangerous relationship with Delilah, a cunning woman from Philistine territory. The Philistine rulers offered Delilah an irresistible reward. "Find out the secret of Samson's strength, and we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver." She agreed and began her deceit. One evening she asked, "Samson, tell me the secret of your great strength. How can someone overpower you?" Samson teased her, replying, "If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man." That night, Delilah tied him with fresh bowstrings and cried, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But Samson snapped the bowstrings effortlessly. Frustrated, she demanded the truth. Samson lied again, saying, "If anyone ties me with new ropes, I'll become weak." Delilah tried this, but Samson broke free once more. Delilah pressed him relentlessly, accusing, "How can you say you love me when you won't confide in me?" Samson gave another false answer. "If you weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric on a loom and tighten it with a pin, I'll lose my strength." But even this failed. Samson's overconfidence is almost painful to watch. He was playing with fire, and everyone could see where this was heading, except him. Day after day, Delilah nagged and manipulated Samson until he finally gave in. "No razor has ever touched my head. My strength comes from my hair, for I have been set apart as a Nazirite to God from birth. If my hair is cut, my strength will leave me, and I will become as weak as any other man." Knowing she had the truth, Delilah informed the Philistine rulers, who returned with the promised silver. That night, while Samson slept, his head in her lap, she had a man shave off his 7 braids. As the Spirit of the Lord departed, Samson's strength left him. When Delilah cried, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you," he awoke but found himself powerless. What a tragic moment! Samson's strength was never about his hair but about his dedication to God. When he broke his vow, the Spirit of the Lord departed, and with it, his strength. The Philistines seized Samson, gouged out his eyes, and bound him with bronze shackles. They led him to Gaza, where he was forced to grind grain in prison, a humiliating task for the lowest of slaves. Samson went from the mighty deliverer of Israel to a blind, broken prisoner. Yet even in this lowest point, God was not done with him. There was still more to his story. Yet, even in his despair, Samson's story wasn't over. his hair, the symbol of his strength and devotion, began to grow back unnoticed. In the darkness of captivity, Samson's faith also began to grow, setting the stage for his ultimate redemption. This is such a powerful reminder that failure isn't final when God is involved. Samson's hair growing back symbolizes hope and restoration, even when it seemed all was lost. Samson, once a mighty warrior, was now blind, chained, and humiliated, paraded as a trophy by the Philistines. Forced into grueling labor, he endured a life of defeat. Yet, in his darkest place, Samson's hair began to grow back, a symbol of God's plan still at work. Humbled and reflective, Samson turned back to God, realizing his true strength had always come from him. Though broken, his faith returned, preparing him for one final act of deliverance. Samson, once the strongest man in Israel, now found himself in chains, blind, and humiliated. The Philistines, who had long feared him, celebrated his capture as a symbolic defeat of Israel and their God. Yet, they didn't realize God wasn't finished with Samson. To honor their god Dagon, the Philistines held a grand festival in a massive temple filled with thousands, including their rulers. Amid the revelry, someone shouted, "Bring out Samson!" Crowd erupted as the once mighty warrior was led in, blind and stumbling. People laughed and jeered, mocking him as a powerless trophy. What a humiliating moment for Samson, but also a defining one. The Philistines were mocking more than Samson. They were mocking the God of Israel. That was their mistake. Samson, calm amid the chaos, whispered to his young servant, "Lead me to the pillars that support the temple. I need to lean against them." Guided to the central pillars, Samson placed his hands on the cold stone and began to pray. "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more so that I may repay the Philistines for what they have done to me." Crowds' laughter faded from Samson's mind as he focused on God's purpose. With renewed strength, he pushed against the pillars, shouting, "Let me die with the Philistines." Columns groaned, cracks forming as the temple trembled. In one earth-shaking moment, the structure collapsed, killing thousands, including Samson himself. This moment wasn't just about Samson, it was about showing the Philistines that the God of Israel is mighty. Samson's sacrifice reminds us that fulfilling God's purpose often requires laying down everything. Samson's sacrifice struck a devastating blow to the Philistines, fulfilling his God-given purpose. His people retrieved his body and buried him in his father's tomb, honoring him as a judge of Israel who, despite his flaws, had delivered his people. Samson's story of strength, failure, and redemption shows that God's plans are never derailed by human flaws. Even at his lowest, Samson's faith was rekindled, and his final prayer, "Sovereign Lord, remember me," reflected his reliance on God. Through his sacrifice, the Philistines were defeated, and God's power was displayed. His life reminds us it's never too late to turn back to God and fulfill his purpose. Even in weakness, God's strength is made perfect, offering redemption and hope. Samson's story challenges us to trust in God's purpose, even when the path seems unclear, and to remember that his plans are always greater than our mistakes. Until next time, may God's grace light your way.
If this story inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Join us in sharing the good news. Subscribe to this channel for more powerful Bible stories, teachings, and words of encouragement to uplift your faith. Click the like button to let us know you enjoyed this, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest videos, and let's grow together in God's Word. Thank you for being part of this journey. Your support helps us spread hope and love to the world.